Okay, so the next thing that you need to know is your time. So the time is going to take you before you start construction. So let's say you sign a contract, you settle on the block of land, and from that point to the point you start construction. And the time is going to take you to start construction. Why? Because if your zoning and all those things aren't ready yet, what happens is that you need to go through a planning process. You need to get all your reports ready. You need to go consult different professionals, get them to okay your development, and then go through your local government authority in order to be able to get an approval for the development. So during that time, you may have settled on the block of land or you may not have settled on the block of land. So you need to figure out what that holding period of that land is actually going to be, because there are two different ways finance works. Finance, there's a different set of financing for just buying an investment property. And then there is a different set of financing for construction when it comes to development and starting construction. And hence there could be two different rates, interest rates. It could be lower just to buy a property and hold it. It could be a little bit more expensive, especially when you are developing it, because it could be a commercial loan depending upon the size of the development. So that's why there are two time periods. One of them is your holding period before you start construction, and then another holding period, not holding period, but construction period, so to speak. But you're still holding the land in there. So let's look at how all these things come together. So I'll get into target development margin in a separate video, but in the meantime, let's just go here. Let me just zoom out a little bit. So we've got here. So we've got finance, and this is the land holding period. So we've got land loan finance. And when you go and buy a block of land, you say, look, I should be able to borrow 80% of the value of the land. So whatever you are buying here for, so it's let's say $1,050,000, and you can borrow 80% of that, and that means, see, the idea of doing a development is to use as less of your own money as possible, because the less money you use of your own, the greater return you can get on your own money, because you only use, let's say, 20% of it. So of the total cost, or 30% of the total cost, and so on. So if you're doing your entire development with your own money, that means you've already bought a block of land. It could be true in a lot of cases. Say, for example, you've been sitting on an ancestral property which was handed down by your grandfather to your father, and then it came to you, and all debt is paid out. There is no debt on the thing, and you are pretty good. So you've got your own money in order to be able to start construction and do whatever you want to do. I'd still say don't use all of your own money. Go and borrow the money, because otherwise, your development margin, which is 33.2%, is going to be exactly the same as the return on equity. Now, if you leverage, the reason you increase that return on your equity is by leveraging, is by borrowing the money and paying the cost of borrowing. So you've got land loan finance here. You've got LVR, or the loan to value ratio, or LTV as it's known in the US. You've got 80% of that, and then you've got your interest rate. So you can borrow, let's say you can borrow the money for 5% or whatever, and because you've already settled on the block of land and so on, or you already started your planning process, and you know that in 6 months time you should be ready for construction. So you allow a holding period of 6 months or 12 months. And if you know that, this is going to be a long holding period, I should allow about 12% before I'm ready for construction. So you need to figure out three things. One, what is the money that you can borrow from your lender just to buy and hold a property while you go through the planning process? What interest is going to cost you, and for how long are you going to hold it for? So these are some ballpark numbers where you're trying to figure out this whole feasibility in under a minute. And once you've got your land sorted, your next port of call is to actually figure out what you can borrow for construction. Now, for construction, we've got this funding table right here. What that funding table is telling you is that we've got debt LVR, LTD, 70%. What this is that what is the maximum amount of money that you'll be able to borrow when it is time for construction? It could be based on, that is what we were selecting right here when we were saying, hey, we've got finance costs, we've got 28,000 or whatever finance cost is coming in, but this is coming based on the total sales. So that means that you go into a lender that is going to borrow you money based on your total costs. So you figure out what that number is and you put that number over here. So let's say it's 65. So you put that 65% over there. So that means that's the money that you'll be able to borrow. If this was GRE, you do nothing, but the calculations are then based on this figure, not that figure. And based on that, you are also able to figure out the amount of money that you will need to put in from your own pocket, because this is super duper important. A lot of developers get caught because they have not been able to figure out what the amount of money that they will need to come up with in order to do the development. They get into a project thinking that they'll carry it on for a while and then be able to get rid of it. But when they can't get rid of it, that means that they're going to either incur a loss or they'll be into all sorts of trouble. So in any case, what you need to figure out is what that money is going to be required based on the money that you can actually borrow. So once you've got that, you put in the maximum amount of money that you can borrow. So when it comes to construction loan, this would include the cost of the land in it. So when you move ahead, you've got your 65%, and then you've got your loan draw utilization. Now, what is that? What that means is that when you are borrowing money for construction, you're not going to borrow the entire loan amount on day one. It is all done progressively as the project unfolds, as the project is built. Your builder or your construction contractor is going to give you a progress claim. If it's a small project, you have the ability to approve it yourself. But if it's anything bigger than 3-4 townhouses or 3-4 apartments, your lender is actually going to force a quantity surveyor or a third party involved to come and inspect what your builder's already done and then release the money accordingly. So in order to account for that, in under 1 minute, I use a loan draw utilization thing. So if you put 60%, that means that's the speed at which your money is going to come up. So when you extrapolate everything, and you'll see in Lead Developer and all those things, we extrapolate everything around an S curve. So because we're doing everything under a minute and we don't have the luxury of having all the details in place, so we do it in a ballpark figure. So we've got 60% and the percentage of interest that you will be charged for construction. And you've got your construction time. So this construction time here again must include your construction time and the time it's actually going to take you to return the money back to the lender. And how can you return the money back? The only way you can return the money back to the lender is when the pre-sales that you made or the project or the units that you sold to somebody else, they have paid you for those units, and that's called a settlement. So once that settlement occurs, that's when you're going to get your money back. So in this scenario, I've got 12, but I know that building 4 townhouses is not going to take me 12 months. It could be done in 10 months, and I've allowed 2 months extra in there. But if you think the construction is going to be 12 months, I'd allow 14 months for construction in here, so that you've got that buffer of 2 months in there, and you calculate the interest for it. So you rather have that buffer built into this, and if you build that habit, you'll see that as you start doing bigger developments or you start getting detailed with all those developments, you'll be able to do your feasibilities more accurately than just throwing out numbers without thinking. So let's leave it at 14% at this stage, and based on that, you will get your finance calculations done. And these finance calculations then go into a loop, and they go into a loop about 10 times in order to come up with a probable value based on what you put in. So once you've got all those things, it tells you that you're making 24% on it. The developer's equity contribution is going to be 1.1. So for something that is going to be a total development cost of 2.7 million, your ballpark figure for developer's equity contribution is going to be about 1.124, 811, and so on.